Welcome back to Dungeons and Designers. This is the fourth and final episode of our campaign 0, session 0. We've gone through each person's character creation, and like we said, there's a good chance before session 1 these will change a little bit and alter as each player thinks about what they chose. But today is our final episode before we get to session 1, and we're going to just do kind of like a session 0 where we can each discuss what we liked a lot about the last campaign, what we kind of are looking forward to in the new campaign, and this will help determine not so much the story, but maybe the style of play. The way we've designed campaign 1 or campaign 2 is that with all these different planets, we can explore different types of gameplay. So what we want to kind of do today is talk about each player thinks about D&D, what are you guys looking for? And then we're all going to kind of understand that we're not always going to get that every session, but if I can keep that in mind and every player can keep that in mind, we can help interject moments that kind of make everybody max happy. So I guess what we could start with is we haven't played campaign 1 for quite a while now. But I think what I would love to hear is if everyone can share like one good thing or one bad thing or both that you left campaign 1. And I think we can ignore the Tomb of Horror episode because that was different, or Azhag's Castle episode. I got you. And the Quest episode, right? Because those were like the two outliers. But out of the other main campaign 1, like what stood out as a good thing and what stood out as something that you might want to see different? I can start just so it takes off the pressure. A good thing for me, I think we had a fun story that every episode something happened. But I also say that was a bad thing for me because it meant that I had to railroad you guys into something every episode. And I think especially towards the end, it felt like it was just going faster than the story could keep up. And I think that's something I'm aware of now, where like maybe something big doesn't have to happen in every episode. Maybe there's time to breathe and time to explore regions.
That's a good point. That's something I feel like I do a lot too, is try to rush the story where we could be more comfortable with not having things planned and really explore the world that you created. Because I know I have a habit of just blasting through, and like you put all this work in these shops and various things. I'm following the character, but to create also like fleshed out enough characters so where we can explore that. Were you up to, Zach?
How many spots on that desert map did we not go to?
Yeah,
I think we went to 3.
Yeah, I think we probably had like 5 or 6 extras. And I didn't expect you guys to hit all those, right? Like I wanted to make it so if you chose one, we could branch off in that direction. And I'm kind of doing that again now. Like there's enough to visit that you won't, in 2 years, we won't be able to visit it all. What I'm hoping is that there's enough where you guys can make decisions and then I can just react without panicking. Where instead it was like, I would just tell you guys where you were going to go. Like you made this decision, you're going to go here. And it wasn't very free for you guys.
As
I needed that.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, that's what I was saying too. As a first time player, I appreciated it. I don't know how much it drove Dan crazy, but I was like, it helped push me forward to get out of my headspace some. Like instead of having to make the big scary blank page decisions, kind of going along with what made sense. It never felt like you grabbed my arm and pulled me in a certain way. It was like that made sense to go that way.
Okay.
So.
Well,
yeah, and I don't. Oh, I keep over talking.
No, you go. You're good. You go.
I feel like closed stories can have a bad reputation, but there's a time and place for that too. Like it makes a better story, and I want to make sure that the story is being told. So I think that that's been really good. At least I can already see it in the first episode that we were recording for this new campaign, where it feels really organic and natural, where sometimes it's closed and sometimes it's open.
Yeah, and I think that's where we're trying. I think my goal is to empower you guys more, because now you've got 20 so episodes under your belt, you could start just making characters and be like, what would my character do as a role, as if you were an actor almost? Like, what would my character do in this situation? Any other thoughts from campaign 1?
I don't want to die anymore.
But you didn't, right?
Well, one soul in a box.
Yeah, I guess nobody technically died.
Yeah.
And I definitely realize how devious you can be, Will. And Taylor, if you're listening.
Oh, so that was Courtney's idea.
And Courtney.
That Courtney was just like, how cool would it be if Taylor was like actually bad? I was like, she's like, I think he could do it. I was like, sounds good to me. That sounds fun.
She texted me 10 minutes after the episode we got done recording. She was like, sorry about that.
Like, are you okay?
Mm-hmm.
But I think maybe that was a little heavy-handed, but that's the kind of thing I want players to be able to do. Is I want the players to be able to influence the story in a more powerful way. And I think a lot of that's just giving you guys the time to.
Right.
Like the collaboration we're doing, especially for this time around. Like, we're building the character with you and making sure everything interlocks together, but we don't know what each other is doing, but you know a lot more than you did the first campaign, I think, about us.
Right. I didn't know anything about you guys, including names. And that's something that happened a few times in campaign 1 where like the guest would come by and be like, hey, what name did you choose? And they would just be like, Keebler or Red. I was just like, we need
Red Hand.
Which, I mean, and those were like 2 of my favorite guests, if I'm going to be biased, right? Because I know them in real life, they're buds.
Yeah.
But I was just like, maybe we need to. And there was like time where like character sheets, like the players that came in with a character sheet that wasn't quite right. And like, I think this is good. That
one person came in, they were so broken. Like,
right.
And luckily they didn't like, I don't think they grasped how broken they accidentally made their person, and they did a couple things. I was like texting Will. I was like, "That's not right." I was like,
yeah. And it was a loose game. It was just fun, just having fun with designers playing a dumb Dungeons and Dragons game. But yeah, in this episode, like I'm making sure you guys know your characters enough, and we're gonna do the guests a little bit different, so that's a little bit more stabilized. But I think there's still gonna be a lot of room for fun.
To that point, you made a lot of effort to make sure that the way the guest is going to play out this time, it doesn't force us to speed up the story too. So that'll be nice. Yeah,
I think it'll be smooth. I think we learned a lot on pacing last campaign, which I'm thankful for. Thankful that it wasn't just like, oh, that was terrible, we don't know what we're doing. It's like, that wasn't as good as I wanted, and I think I know why. And I think you guys helped explain that too. Like, you guys were always able to give me some feedback, and that helped me kind of realize what was going on.
And it's always difficult to like have a world that doesn't feel like one of those Disney boat rides where it just kind of like is on a track and just goes, or like where you think it's going to go one way. It's like, nope, you're not allowed. Nope, go this way.
Yeah.
Yeah, honestly, I just don't want the game to feel like it's a small world. That's my number one goal on every document I write. Just like, this can't be a small world.
So yeah, it's.
Are you still having the nightmares about that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Nightmares?
No, it's just a joke.
Oh, okay. I was like, is this a deep seated?
The little dolls like just start from It's a Small World, or just inhabit his dreams for the last 20 years. It's rough.
Did it, but I think that's a good point. That is kind of what I did campaign 1, right? That kind of felt like a boat ride, and you guys were able to interact with the mannequins around you or the maquettes around you. But
plenty to mess with your boat ride, though. I caught everything on fire.
That's true. There was many episodes of fire or shatter being disruptive.
I am glad that the other 4 characters I had made never saw the light of day.
That's true. So the listeners probably don't know is that I was expecting to just kill your characters off like one an episode, because you're like tossable goblins, right? And they would just throw another goblin After episode 3, I realized you guys probably were not emotionally ready for me just to kill your characters every episode. So we pulled that.
You could.
I could have.
Yeah, it is interesting how build out like a one-off character differently than I would a long-term campaign. I think I've put a lot more thought into Peg or this new character in a good way.
Yeah, I think you can agree or not. For me, like my first early D&D characters, I didn't know what D&D was.
Yeah.
And after playing, like you could write this huge backstory, and then you realize after a few sessions, like that backstory really doesn't do anything. And that you could easily sum it up in like sentences that could relate to a game way more powerfully than what your grandfather did as a job. Like,
yeah.
And you can use your energy more efficiently when making characters, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like does something like that, because you have a lot more experience in playing the different characters, does something like that influence your decisions or the way you feel emotionally in a moment that you won't actually say like, oh, my grandfather did this?
I mean, they could.
I think at a higher level of play it should and it would.
Okay.
Because like that's kind of when you get into like the more detailed orientation of like alignment and backstory and like, okay, this is why I'm aligned this way and this is why I make decisions this way. It doesn't mean it's like a hard holding, thing where I can't deviate from that whatsoever, but it influences the ways that I interact with stuff. So like, if I come, even just type of background you come from, if I come from an affluent background, I'm going to have a harder time interacting with like NPCs that are like peasants, or, I won't be able to actually understand for that perspective. So, but it's hard to like fully put yourself into a perspective from a different thing, especially like in a fantasy world, different like complete species possibly.
Yes.
Like it's that nice middle ground. With Finnick, I think I came up with him in like 8 minutes. The name was the hardest part. The rest of it just straightforward. With Bean, I totally overdeveloped him. I had everything written out. I had a full background, what his parents did, how he ended up on this island. I don't know if you remember that. It was just everything was developed.
Yeah.
And there was no character touchdowns. It was just that. And so now with this new character, I'm back in the middle. The backstory, I know, like Dan, you were just saying, there's the touch points, like what level of affluent she is or where, you know what I mean? I think that nice middle ground is a better place to start from than either of the other two characters I played first season.
I think if this is called Dungeons and Designers. So if we like take a look at UX personas and how we develop these kind of stories for our potential users, I think it's very similar to how you could make a character where like you might not care about someone's grandparents in a persona, but you might care about how much money they're making, where they live, how many kids they have, because these are the things that are going to directly impact all of their big decision making.
Or even how do they view themselves and how do they want to present to the rest of their team and then to their customers.
And there's, of course, like we pretend often that that's predictable, right? Like, oh, we understand them now. We understand what they're going to do. But there's always edge cases, right? So I think at a certain point, you should be able to like instinctively know what your character is going to do in a game. But that doesn't mean it's always going to be consistent. And there's not going to always be these like little edge cases of like Yola in campaign 1 slowly changing and becoming more like this sword art person. Like in the beginning, you wouldn't guess that, but like little decisions and edge cases will change things over time. And I think there's freedom, like alignment. Like you're not stuck to being one alignment. Like you are going through things in this campaign in D&D that's bigger than anything we're going to go through in real life, right? Like,
yeah,
we do not kill a dozen goblins in a day every day.
And like Tuesdays.
Right, just Tuesdays. So like what does that do to your psyche over time? And I think that's a fair thing to justify changing how you act. It's like, oh wow, I'm seeing things for the first time I've never experienced before. Even just traveling, right? Like if we travel to another country and you see how other people are living and you come back to your hometown, you're like, oh wow, this is different. Like this is not the only way you need to live, and it maybe changes your views on life. I mean, your D&D characters are doing that times 10, like every session times 10.
Interesting thing with combat, at least, because exactly to your point, like I'm feeling those emotions and comparing it to movies, and so impressed with those action characters who are like, oh, I'm just gonna slice this person, whereas I have more hesitation with that. Or in a video game, I'm like, oh, this is just how it's set up, so I'm gonna like fight this guy. But actually feeling those feelings, it's a lot more complex in D&D.
Yeah, I think role-playing games remove the avatar that you can project on, and like you're the avatar. So it's definitely a little bit more, if you're open to it, a little bit more emotionally connected.
Yeah.
But it could also just be a video game for a lot of people. 4th edition proves that that's what D&D wanted for a little bit. 4th edition was like very much like a video game, and that's not saying it was bad. It was just different. And then 5e is bringing in more of that kind of emotional RP, which I think combat, we can discuss that for a bit. So campaign 1 was a lot of combat, little role play, and I think a lot of that came down to just I didn't have things for you guys to interact with. A couple towns there was, like I planned out like NPCs and we just kind of skipped over them, which is fine, right? Like that's D&D, things get skipped. It's not a bad thing. But what are you guys thinking for campaign 2? What kind of gameplay do you want when it comes to like combat versus towns? I think, Dan, you shared when we were playing campaign 1, one of your other games and how they run towns, and like you'll have episodes in towns. Am I making this up?
We do town, most of our town work over like Discord when we're not playing.
And maybe that would be an interesting idea. Like maybe there's time for us to do some of this kind of RP town item management over Discord in between sessions, and then when we start a new session, we just recap like what we did so that you guys can have the ability to think through like what shops do I need. So like when I'm like, hey, do you guys want to go to a shop? And you're like, what shops are there? I'm like, what are you looking for? And you're like, I don't know. It's like, well, we can like just list all shops if you want. Maybe that would be better handled through Discord and recapped before we start another session.
Yeah, it could be fun.
Have you guys played any other RPGs since we started? Zach, I know you played a bit of Quest, which is that really cool, more like beginner-friendly RPG.
Yeah, most of those have been one-offs, though. So if there was any shop or town scenes, they happened immediately before the event.
Sure. I guess more than like the shops and stuff, even video games that you guys might be playing, are there things that you've experienced in this kind of gaming creative space that you think would be an interesting influence on our campaign 2?
I have been tracking along with a coworker who is currently playing Monster of the Week.
I never heard of it.
And it's basically a gamified version of shows like Buffy the Vampire Slayer or Firefly.
Okay.
You know, basically shows where there's a Monster of the Week. Or Doctor Who even. You know, you didn't see him last time. There's an overarching story. But this week you might fight a new version of an alien or a new hell spawn that's been released on this small California town. Kind of, and it's run on a powered by the apocalypse kind of rule set. You know, you have successes or failures based on how high you roll a d6, and there's a lot of fun flavor in not necessarily classes or species or races, but in the roles that different people have. For Monster of the Week, there's I don't remember what it's called, but there's basically the human role, the person who has no powers, no special guidance, no cool gun shooting abilities or any they're basically
civilians that
that get dragged in with this group. think like Xander from Buffy, or who's the one from Avatar: The Last Airbender? Sokka,
Mhm.
the brother.
Yeah.
You know, good with the he was good with the boomerang, but they still have abilities like being able to find duct tape
Sure.
when the hero may need it. Then there's the magic caster, the healer. So kind of having, and this comes from video games too, but having people in a party
That
also
rolls.
have their roles. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Could be a
interesting.
cool.
I think it's a super interesting way to look at it. A weird thing we're doing is that I'm trying to keep all of your character information kind of secret from each other. So like when you introduce your character and we start playing session 1 and 2, what would you tell somebody when you meet them, right? And you probably wouldn't be like, if you were a bard, you might be like, I play instruments, right? And you would explain all that, but you probably wouldn't be like, I'm a bard. But
And
maybe
when I
like
play those instruments, it
but, like-
has effects on people.
right, and like bard out of all the most, right? Like because of the personality of normal bards, they might be the ones to be like, look what I can do. But I think there's other like classes, like the druid. Like when they first met someone, they probably would be like, I can also turn into animals. Did you know that? Right? Like, what would you tell somebody upon first meeting? And I think like name, and then they can see your appearance, and there might be like personality things that come out. But you might not know how each other fits in a role right away, right? And I think that's going to be interesting is how you guys find your roles. And I'm sure it will happen quick, but I think those first few episodes will be interesting just to see like how it's who rushes in first to combat, or who's the first one to speak at the counter with a merchant.
So fun, the mystery element, because it feels more organic and like relatable to life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm down with it.
So another thing that I've been reading a lot about and experiencing through Mandalorian is this idea like when you have a spaceship, you're able to go to different planets that feel totally different. Mm-hmm. And Mandalorian's been really cool because like every episode feels quite different than the episode before, but there's a storyline pulling you through. D&D is obviously a combat simulator for the most part, but there's other things that happen in D&D that could be explored, like Tomb of Horrors. There's very little combat, right? There is combat, but it's mostly puzzles. So like you have an entire session or two of just puzzle and exploring, but there's also mystery, there's political drama, there's like every type of aspect of media and TV that you could watch, you could experience through D&D. So if we were going to say like combat's obviously going to be a big part of it, like what other type of gameplays would you guys be interested in exploring through the D&D experience?
I definitely want a spooky murder mystery.
Sure.
Scooby-Doo style.
Mm-hmm.
I saw this is totally off topic. I'm sorry, Courtney. What's that? I saw it was someone in North Carolina, and they were doing like a stories Instagram thing. And she's like,
yeah.
It is getting crazy out there. There were kids running around. There was a dog running around. Some kid tried to rip off an old person's mask. And like as she was walking, she walked past the mystery mobile or van. So she was just like explaining, but like in a COVID setting, it was like really hilarious.
That's amazing. That makes me very happy. I need to find that.
Yeah. But
Yeah, I was gonna parallel what you're saying. I love the mysteries, and because it kind of guides where we're going, and it adds it gives us some footholds for role play as well,
mm-hmm.
which is something that I probably struggle with the most, is just like getting into character and acting. It takes a lot of courage, or like knowing what to do next. And I like how clever we can be with a mystery or a puzzle,
Mm-hmm.
and that there's multiple ways we could potentially solve it, and that it rewards cleverness.
Yeah, I think Tomb of Horrors was like a really fun example of your out of character communication with each other could have been in character, because you're just sitting there like frustrated over a puzzle talking to each other. And that might help kind of this in person where you are just your player because you're not rolling dice. You're just trying to figure out how to beat this room.
Yeah.
And
I think it's difficult a lot of times, like difficulty gauge on puzzles and mystery type things,
Mm-hmm.
like from a writing perspective.
Yeah.
Because you have to make it like the balance of like actually solvable and not just like overtly obvious what's going. It's a very difficult challenge for sure.
Yeah, was hard. The episode you didn't, Dan, you weren't for, where Azhag got possessed. And I was like, I'm just going to do like this fun like word riddle thing. And we'll see if it works out. It could be too long. I'll put like an extra one just in case. And like Courtney burnt through them. It was like immediately. Like, I was like, what are these words? And I can't remember who the guest was. I think it was Pallavi.
Mm-hmm.
And Pallavi's first language isn't English. She's from India. So she was like struggling a little bit with them. I think she had fun, but she was like struggling with them. And if it was just her, we would have never gone through the episode. But like Courtney was just there, just like, oh, I know what it is. Like, and then Tomb of Horrors was the same thing, where it was just like, these puzzles are hard, and there was definitely things that you guys missed in Tomb of Horrors because the puzzles were too hard. But it's like giving you a second attempt that might bring you through a different direction that gives you less payoff. But like, are there multiple ways to solve this and get out of it? But it's not easy for sure.
Yeah.
What was it? Tasha's Cauldron of Everything came out, and there's the back section's puzzles. And for the most part, it was a big letdown because they're fairly boring. It's just like, use this key on this thing. And then the way to help you guys solve it, if you can't, is have you roll a die. If you get more than 10, I just give you a hint. And it was just like, I don't know. To what Dan was saying, like doing more than that would be very hard. But doing less than that isn't enough. Like it fell flat.
Pointless. Yeah.
I guess you could incorporate into the story. There was one arc of Adventure Zone where there was a puzzle and they went to this person who could give them hints, but it was like she was reading their fortunes almost.
Sure.
And you could roll a die to figure out which hint she would give you. But that was a tough one. They like replayed it over and over again until they got it right. But those are rewarding for me, but I'm wondering what everybody else likes in D&D.
I almost like the I think they did this in the old game Fables. If you couldn't figure out a puzzle, a side quest would come up, and then that would give you the hint to come back and solve the main puzzle. And since we have more of a flexibility going into this one with less fixed story markers, maybe something like that could be worked in. But my brain keeps flittering more to genres than a certain play aspect.
Sure.
Like you talked about Mandalorian, I really love, especially this season, the playfulness in genres. Like it almost goes back and forth each episodes. Even Lovecraft Country recently did this where like, with Mandalorian, I don't want to spoil anything, but there's the one where they get trapped in the ice cave. That's a horror episode.
Sure.
That's a scary episode.
Feels totally different than the next episode.
Then the next episode is a Western.
Right.
And then it goes back to a spy incursion episode.
Yeah.
You got to get into this building, get the information, get out of the building. Then, within that, there's even more like love stories sprinkled in and stuff like that.
And I think that was that's why I bring up the question is with eventually you guys are going to start on a space station, but eventually you get off and then there's like entire galaxy or entire solar system that you're within. And then there's a second solar system you can eventually go to if you can get a ship that can get you there. But with that, we can kind of focus, like if Courtney wants a mystery or a puzzle, like we're going to go to a planet and for 3-4 sessions, you're going to just experience like that kind of gameplay because that's what Courtney wants. And then if Dan wants like a combat game, like you're going to go to a planet where in 3 or 4 episodes might just be combat. Like maybe you have to fight your way through something or Zach, like you're saying, like if a Western or something, like if you're like, I really think like a cool spaghetti Western would be a nice change up. Like you'll go to a planet or you'll go to another space station and we can introduce that.
And I do want that.
And we'll just need to like, I think this will be very easy. Something they talk about with DMing, and when I say they, I mean people smarter than me in D&D. They talk about trying to focus on every player, every session. And though I think that's great for like a 4 or 5 hour session. We usually play for 2 hours at the most. And we do have the pressure of like telling a story to the people who are listening to this conversation. So even if I can't focus on each of you every episode, I think if we can focus on each of you for a story block, and then I think that'll make for interesting listening and a consistent kind of fun, explorative story, hopefully.
One thing I'm really hoping for, and this is a pipe dream, and it really depends on everyone listening to this and people who listen going forward.
Mm-hmm.
I know that Will and Dan, you have aspects of the game on the Patreon so people can utilize it in theirs.
Yep.
I would love more than anything for those stories to bleed into our story.
Yeah.
If somebody who's on Patreon says, I found this on this planet, and then that got mentioned, or like something got blown up and it popped up on a newspaper or something in our game, or even a new item or something like that, that immersive real universe would be.
Yeah, I think I read something like that on our Patreon. Was like, if you guys come up with items that you like or things that happen on planets that you like lore, like send it over. But what I'd be more excited to eventually, if a party does play with this setting, is that our parties could like meet each other, and we could do some kind of weird like 9-person game with like another party and 2 DMs and do something like really weird.
Cool.
But yeah, that
crossover episode.
Yeah, but that would require like listener engagement, and
that depends on you guys. If you listeners, if you also like that idea, you got to do it.
Mm-hmm.
We can't make you do it.
But yeah, I think
legally,
that's a good point. No, we can't force you. Yeah, so I think that like that covers kind of what I was thinking about our game and how I'm setting it up so that each of you can have kind of your moments of joy. But it would be dependent on you being vocal about those things and what you want and telling me so I can kind of list it out and be like, okay, I have in my head what we're doing on the station already. So like you're going to live in my joy. But then like once you get off the station, like who's going to get the first one? And there's a very good chance whoever gets the first one will be just the person who is like most vocal and telling me what they wanted. Right. So like, I think that's a good way for DMs to alter their game. If you're playing like a pre-made campaign, that's going to be very hard. Like you're kind of stuck doing what that campaign allows. But there's room, right? There's room. If you can't change story, you could change how you tell a story and make it more comedic or more serious, or like Strahd. That could be a dark gothic horror. But you could also tell it more like a Frankenstein comedy.
Young Frankenstein. Yeah.
Yeah.
Frankenstein.
So
werewolf. I really liked and I know we're getting kind of timey-wimey with this, but I liked the amount of roleplay Courtney and I were able to have in that first episode we've already recorded.
Mm-hmm.
That you hit that right on the head with that one.
Yeah, and I think we're finding our pace, and I think we're going to get there. I'm excited to see what Campaign 2 does, specifically with role-playing and world building and storytelling.
This world that you two have come up with is incredible.
Yeah, it's really rich.
I'm hoping it doesn't unravel. It was
We'll see.
so for yeah, we'll see. For other DMs that are trying to do a homebrew setting. So my first campaign was totally from scratch, right? Like everything was taking kind of like D&D
What was
classes.
the breakdown on that? Like what you had prepared beforehand and during while we were recording, how much?
I think I had every area planned out, but no details. So like when you got to a section, I just like planned the details for that the week before, 2 weeks before. But what's been easier about this one is starting with what Wizards has made first. So like I took what Faerun and Toril and what D&D has been doing for decades and then destroyed it so that we could build upon it. And by building upon it, like I didn't come up with all those planets. Like those planets are there. I believe they were only explored in Spelljammer, and I don't know anything about Spelljammer, so I'm just kind of doing whatever I want to those planets.
Yeah.
I think Spelljammer was like a second and third edition thing or first edition. I don't know. It was before I would start playing D&D seriously. So I'm just doing whatever I want to these planets. But having like the details of the planet, like the water world, the desert world, like D&D established those already. You can find them on the Wikipedia.
Okay.
So I've been pulling that, and I think for other DMs, like that's a really cool way of starting a homebrew setting is start with the building blocks that someone else has already made.
Yeah, I mean, it's just Lego building. You're starting with those blocks, but you're still becoming your own.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And players will help alter that too, right? Like players tell a story and change it on the fly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I don't know if you guys have any other like kind of final thoughts about things to improve from campaign 1, things you hope to see in campaign 2, things that you loved about campaign 1 and want to see more of.
I know we'll intrinsically have less metagaming because I understand the game better than I did a year ago.
Yeah, it should be cool to kind of start fresh with you guys having a decent sized campaign under your belt, right?
Yeah,
Mhm.
thanks for your patience, Dan. I don't know what you're thinking.
No,
It's like,
I-
oh god.
I just like to play. That's
Yeah.
fun. It's fun as have all the different guests. As an introvert, I don't. Well, I'll play a campaign with somebody. It's like the same people for like years.
Mm-hmm.
So having a new
Mhm.
person every week's been kind of weird at first, but it's fun. I think I've been blessed with a lot of really good guests too. Which
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think for listeners,
Everybody except Taylor's been wonderful.
So for the listeners and for you guys, because you probably don't know, so session 1 will not have a guest. Session 2 will not have a guest. But session 3, I'm talking to 2 people already. 1 I think is signed up, but I have a backup. So that'll either be session 3 and 4 will be those 2. And I'm very excited for who they are. They're not penned in the calendar yet, so I'm not going to spoil it. But we'll have guests back hopefully every 2 weeks, every session from 3 on.
And back to the shyness thing. That's been the biggest stumbling block for me too. Or you said introversion. I'll call it shyness for myself. But I think I would love for my character to make more friends with NPCs and just various people or guests. That's kind of something that I'm saying as a goal for myself, but it does take a lot of courage and like skills that my character has that I might not have has been an interesting thing in D&D for me to navigate. But this is just a random tangent, but I'm really excited for all the different planets that we can go and discover. And I also kind of want to put into context when we get there, like, this is one city on the planet and the whole planet isn't this.
No.
Not like Star Trek where like this whole planet's the
Right.
same. There's not diversity of people here.
So that's gonna be like my struggle is like, how do I convince you guys to get off a planet that you haven't explored? Like you've explored like one tiny part of it. Be like, all right, guys, you spent 5 days on this planet. Let's get off. You're like, but there's another side. You're like,
What about these other towns?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've been playing No Man's Sky for a while, long enough to just peace out of there, no matter how much cool stuff is.
I tried that game for a while.
It's gotten a lot better if you haven't tried it in the last
So
year.
Just won the just won a big award.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll have
Game
to
Awards,
reinstall it.
They beat out like a lot of big name games too. So
Nice.
I know I played after like one of the first huge updates where they're like, we are fulfilling all the promises we broke the first time, and it was much better. It was like a fun, but it was kind of just like Minecraft for me. I have issues with Minecraft because I just don't. There's nothing to drive me to stay.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I want,
it's 20 times bigger than it was last time.
Dig holes. That's what you do with Minecraft,
right? And I don't play with friends, so like that's an issue.
Bigger.
And then you build a house behind a waterfall.
But on No Man's Sky, like, aren't there people? There's like politics now, and like people colonizing, and
people have made rave planets.
All right, well, you guys need to get computers, PCs specifically, and play with me then. I can be open. Like the games that I'm thinking about when planning this, Destiny 2 has been a huge inspiration for me of mixing fantasy and sci-fi and just beautiful storytelling and worlds that feel individual. There's another game called Elite Dangerous, which is just like a space simulator. It's just really nerdy. Like when you're traveling past the sun, if you're too close, it will pull you in and will use your fuel to get out. So then you're just kind of suspended in space. Like,
oh snap!
Really nerdy things that we probably won't do that deep. But I think like this idea of space travel isn't just going from planet to planet, right? Like there's a void in between that you are trying to travel. There will probably be episodes of you guys just in your ship traveling and trying to figure out why your ship isn't working or stuff like that.
Can we just do a whole storyline, like a whole massive EVE Online,
Yeah.
like election drama kind of thing?
Oh, so if you want political drama, there are political forces at hand already that we could tap into. But I don't think we're going to do that because we have enough political drama in our current lives.
Yeah, that's true.
But if people who have access to the document want to do that with their party, it's there. Another game that I've been playing or trying to play, my computer can't run it, is Star Citizen. Is that what it's called? Yeah, it's the most beautiful game I've ever played. And you start as just like a pilot on a station, and there's quests and stuff. But like the grandness of what a galaxy, like Earth feels huge, but Earth is nothing compared to like the grandness of the solar system and beyond. I don't know how we're going to capture that without visuals. But we're going to try.
I love your descriptions. Yeah, it's like that's what I live for in video games, at least being immersed in the eye candy.
Yeah,
and I love the descriptions you give.
I highly recommend people look into Star Citizen. Maybe don't buy it. I was happy to give the developers money and try to play it on my machine. But it's a hefty
Play it
boy.
online when you come home.
Yeah, I might need to. Or new machine this summer. So we'll see. Those are kind of the things that I look forward to, are these kind of high simulator. I know that's not for everybody, so I won't force it on you guys every minute. But I think there will be times where I don't want every episode to be like you killing the bad guy again. And I think ways to do that is like how do you explore space? How do you explore a planet? Icewind Dale came out, and a lot of that, like your enemy was the weather for a lot of that. Like where you could just be climbing a mountain, all of a sudden a blizzard hits and you're not fighting a troll, but like you're still dying. I think that kind of stuff could be neat to explore as our party.
Yeah,
There needs to be one owl bear too, by the way.
Owl bears are cool. I don't think I included those in the last campaign, did I?
No, just one on a jungle planet somewhere.
Yeah, kind of a Tomb of Annihilation type jungle. There's dinosaurs and owl bears.
It was stuff that I hadn't asked you to put in, and it was like, because I've always wanted to play D&D, and I've mentioned it before. Like, growing up, I wasn't allowed to, and then you hit a certain age, I didn't have any friends who were playing, so I couldn't get into it that way. And then I was like, oh, cool! I got to fight a beholder.
Yeah,
I got to. What are the ones that
you interacted with?
I got to ignore a mimic. That was fun.
So you now got to pull a card from the deck of many things.
It's like four cards. Some people never get to pull one. I pulled like four.
You went full hog.
Yeah.
So
my buddy who DMs with one of my groups, he'll have his kid make up monsters sometimes. So we fought an alligator the other day, and it was this ginormous owl mixed with the alligator. It was pretty funny.
And then you're like, while fighting the alligator, you're like, oh yeah, this is how Avatar did their creatures.
You're just like, hey, you're 4 years old. What kind of animal should they fight? Yeah,
that's something I'm going to be trying to do. Is I got this second supplement book, Arcana of the Ancients, and it's got like a dense monster section. But it's just like reskinning monsters in D&D so that you guys don't know what to expect. Even if it's just like same stats, same abilities, but like it looks different. So maybe you guys won't know what to do. And like, if you're like, what's it called? I'll just make up a name, and then you'll Google it and you'll be like, that's not a thing.
Bob.
But that would be, I think, hard, but also interesting. Is like, we know Toril for what its creatures were, like what are on these other planets, and what expanded monster manual can we kind of create. Should be kind of fun. Cool. I think I've ticked off all my boxes that I wanted to discuss as the DM. Are there any other boxes or things you guys want to talk about as players?
Oh, there's so much I want to ask. I don't know what race or class or anything anybody is, but I'm not going to do that because that's part of the fun of this.
Yeah, as you introduce in the session 1 and session 2, you'll experience that. It'll be fun.
Touch base later, like a couple months from now, again, on what our thoughts are. So This is good for now.
For sure. Yeah, and if you guys want another episode like this, let me know. Maybe after we get off Lathander's Ring, we can try again. I think that's a good thing for groups to do at home even, is just like touch bases to make sure everyone's happy.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. I think that's it then. We'll see you next week, I believe, with session 1. Bye. That's another episode of Dungeons and Designers. Intro music is by Mon Plaisir. Editing and animation was done by me, your friendly DM, Will. Find this and more in the description.